Oh, hello. My name is Mara, and welcome to Books Like Whoa. So, Project Poirot rolls on this week, and whew, guys, I think we're reaching the dark times, the bad times. I jumped the gun because I thought that after Sad Cypress, maybe that's when it was going to happen, but like I actually think we're hitting the sad times now. We're talking about the Labors of Hercules this week for Project Poirot, which is a collection of related short stories that were published between, I think, 1939 and 1947. There's some things I want to say about this, but before I get into that, I should just do my typical disclaimer, which is I do not do spoilers in these videos. Typically, I would do a synopsis and take you up to roundabouts where we find a body. This is a collection of short stories, so we'll do things a little differently. And I may get into some character details that once you know the solution to the mystery might be telling in retrospect, but shouldn't, I don't think, impact anyone's enjoyment of the story. So that's my disclaimer. Now let's get into this particular title. So the Labors of Hercules, fun fact, is the first ebook I ever bought because I couldn't find a physical copy anywhere at the time. And yeah, so first ebook I ever bought. It is a collection, like I said, of related short stories that were published between 1939 and 1947. And it centers around this lovely contrivance. So there's a prologue where basically Poirot, I think, wants to retire, but he wants to have like some last good cases before he does that. I think knowing that Agatha Christie wrote what would be the final Poirot book in this time period as well, I think she was sort of optimistically hoping this could kind of be her wrap up with Poirot, but he was so popular that she didn't quite get the chance to do that. But anyway, so he wants to have some like last good cases before he retires, and he's talking to a friend of his, and somehow he doesn't know the origins of his own name, question mark, like I guess he hasn't heard of Hercules before. So he's like, oh, like he does like some encyclopediaing or whatever he did before the internet was a thing, and finds out about the 12 labors of Heracles / Hercules, and decides to use that basically as like the premise of his last cases. Now I have a list here of what those labors are. So if you don't know, this is a part of Greek mythology. It's a pretty well-known myth, and basically, God, it's such a weird misogynistic myth, but you know, Hercules goes a little crazy, as one does, and you know, he kills his wife and children, and then he feels real bad about it, guys. Like he has regrets about it. And so to purify himself, the oracle at Delphi tells him to complete what originally is going to be 10 tasks, but ends up being 12. And those tasks for the king of, I forget where, but for some reason he has to do this for some random king. They are to slay the Nemean lion, to slay the 9-headed Lernaean hydra, to capture the Cyrenian hind, to capture the Erymathian boar. You guys are impressed with this pronunciation, right? To clean the Augean stables in a single day, to slay the Stymphalian birds, to capture the Cretan bull, to steal the mares of Diomedes, to obtain the girdle of Hippolyta, who's the queen of the Amazons, hello Wonder Woman, to obtain the cattle of the monster Gririon, to steal the apples of Hesperides, and to capture and bring back Cerberus from the underworld. So those are the tasks in the original myth. And so Poirot decides that he's going to find cases for him to work on that will align with these various tasks. And he does, even though some of the connections to the myth are, let's say, tenuous at best. Yeah, so that's the premise of this short story collection. There are obviously 12 of them to correspond with the various tasks, and let's just get into this. So, you guys know that I love Agatha Christie short stories, and I have to say, I'm trying to like temper my reaction here, because it is not that these are bad short stories. These are actually very, very good short stories. Like, I recommend this. I think that this is a good collection. Like, there's nothing actually wrong with the collection. I think I am just really sick of Agatha Christie coming up with these like framing devices and then just being so weird about trying to stick to them so specifically, and I just don't understand. Like, I just think that it makes things feel really contrived, and sometimes she gets away with it more. Like, for instance, 1, 2, buckle my shoe. I don't think that that mystery especially had a ton to do with that nursery rhyme. I don't think that it was like an especially well-suited story for that nursery rhyme, but it's a novel, and so I think that she's able to have enough going on that it didn't feel as labored, fun, as labored as, for instance, this one does. And also look at And Then There Were None. Okay, she manages to take the nursery rhyme and really make it an integral part of the story and make it feel menacing and like creepy, and it really serves the story. And in this case, it just feels like she came up with a framing device and then like wrote around it, and it felt, I guess it just seemed like a situation where the premise was shackling the story, and I think I just was feeling resentful of that, basically. So I should say these short stories are good. Like, I would recommend them to people who are interested in Agatha Christie short stories. I think I had a particular fondness for them when I read them because I want to say this is probably the first short story collection from her I read, and they're some of my favorite things to read from her in general. So I think I had rose-colored glasses. I also should just caveat, because next week's is also, spoilers, not going to be very positive. I think I'm just maybe getting a little bit fatigued because I've been reading so much of her and we're hitting the bad times. So some of this might be just saltiness on my part. I feel like I'm being very negative right now. I just, like, they're good. I don't want to take away from that, but I just did not enjoy this the way that I wanted to and the way that I fucking should for an Agatha Christie short story collection. You guys know how I feel about these. So I'm hopeful, because not next week but the week after I have another Agatha Christie short story collection. It's one that I've not read before, and they are unrelated. Like, it is just a collection, and I think that that will be something I enjoy more. So like, I'm looking forward to that. But in terms of like my feelings about this, like, why did she go through all the trouble of doing this? Okay, that being said, let's just do a couple of cultural things, and I'm gonna wrap this up because I don't want to be too negative, and I feel like the longer I talk about this, the more negative I'm going to become. So let me just comment on a couple of other things. So I do want to say that we finally get some real acknowledgement that World War II is a thing. So I was worried we weren't gonna get any of that in Poirot books, but because this was written over the span of 39 to 47, World War II comes up quite a bit. Now, that being said, there's some interesting, I'm gonna say mildly anti-Semitic attitudes in how some of these characters are portrayed, because there are a number of characters who are essentially like refugees, oh, and this also gets into, she has, okay, sorry, scattered, two things. One, there are all these refugees, and they're usually Jewish, and they are usually not, in the end, portrayed very warmly. So that's a thing, and it's noted in Christie scholarship that she has some like low-key anti-Semitic things. To be fair, like, to this day most people do. Like, the plight of the Jews. Oh my god, if you ever just want to read like a history of people being like shit on, just look up some stuff about Jewish history. But anyway, that's a side note. So there's that. Then also coming back to, many of these Jewish refugees are doctors, and this gets into something I've noted before. Like, I think we saw this in Murder of Roger Ackroyd, Death on the Nile, like there's been a few of them. She has like a suspicion or like questionableness on how she always portrays Germanic doctors, and I don't know if that's like residual sort of like resentment from World War I for the Germanic piece, and I'm not sure, maybe because she worked as a pharmacist during World War I, she had some bad experiences with doctors, I don't know, but there's some like questionableness around this. Oh, no, it wasn't the Murder of Roger Ackroyd, sorry. It was The Mysterious Affair at Styles. There was a questionable Germanic doctor in that one. So anyway, that's just a side note. That's an ongoing theme, and you see that a few times in these short stories. You do also get quite a bit of like international intrigue in this one. So there's like a couple of them that take place in Switzerland, or like major parts of Switzerland. And definitely, again, in this time period, Switzerland is the logical place where things can take place internationally, just because of the conflict that's going on. I will say it's interesting because one of the later stories, and maybe this was, I didn't look up its specific publication date, but one of the later stories has a young girl going to boarding school from England to France, and if this was in the middle of the war period, I would find that to be highly unusual. So this must have been post-war when that one was published, just because I don't really see a lot of plausibility in someone from the UK sending their daughter to be finished in German-occupied France. So I think that that probably was a piece of it. But anyway, because Switzerland was neutral, that's obviously the most like natural place for her to have some of her international shenanigans going on. So yeah, that was like an interesting, I enjoyed, again, I'm being very harsh. I enjoyed these stories on sort of like a face value for what they are. And in particular, if I was going to recommend some of the stories from this, I don't want to try to make sure I'm pronouncing these approximately correctly. The one that I would recommend most is actually the first one, which is the Nemean Lion. I liked that one quite a bit. I also enjoyed the Girdle of Hippolyta. I thought that that one was really good. I very much enjoyed that. And then I think those are probably my two favorites from this. I did also like the last two, the Stealing the Apples of Hesperides and then the Capture of Sybaris. But really the only reason I like the Capture of Sybaris is because the Count Vera Rosikoff comes back in that one, and I love her. She's so fabulous. She's awesome. So anyway, for what it's worth, I do think that there's some good short stories in this. I just think that the framing device around them is clunky. And I do really like, oh, actually, you know what? Strike that, because the other one that I really, really liked was the Flock of Geryon, because it's tied to the Nemean Lion, and I really liked the character that we meet in the Nemean Lion and then again in the Flock of Geryon, which was, I think her name was Miss Cranby? That sounds right, Amy Cranby. I thought she was a fascinating character. Definitely, to me, the most engaging piece of this entire collection was hearing her story in the first one and then having her come back and that whole, like, it's basically a story about a cult, the Flock of Geryon, and I thought that was just super interesting. So actually that was a really good story. I liked that one probably as much as the Nemean Lion. Those were my two favorites in this collection. So anyway, so I really liked Miss Cranby, and I think that it was definitely an interesting reflection on the fact that even as late as the 40s, women, poor genteel women, were in a very tough spot in terms of what their social and economic options were. If they wanted to, essentially their economic options were very limited by the fact that they had some level of social status. And I just think that that's interesting. If you go back even into the 19th century, there's some fascinating things you can read about how essentially there was a great man shortage for whatever reason. Like, some of it had to do with war, but a lot of it was just like for whatever reason there weren't as many men born, and so there was like this disproportionate, like the whole middle class and up social structure was predicated on women being able to get married, and you had this entire like cohort of single women, and that created like some real social and economic issues because their status, they were supposed to be getting married and they couldn't do that. So anyway, it's just interesting to see that as late as the 1940s, women of at least her generation still, once they reached a certain age, they had very limited options as to how they could support themselves. So anyway, just interesting to think about that. And I kind of wonder how long that lasts. I don't know. I like, it's so bizarre. And sometimes I take for granted the fact that like I am a woman living in the 21st century. I don't necessarily want to get married. We'll see what happens, but I don't especially want to do that. And like, that's a valid option for me socially and economically. Like, I can support myself completely in a completely respectable manner. I can be completely socially accepted. I mean, I'm in the South, so like, all my aunties are like wanting me to produce children for them, but that, I can deal with that. That's whatever. In general, it's not like I'm cut off from society because I'm not married. So like, good reminder to all my fellow single ladies out there that like, whew, thank God we are living now and not even like 50 years ago. And hopefully in 50 years from now, it will be even better. So anyway, I'll take that as my lesson from this book. But yeah, as you can tell, I'm not very enthusiastic about this one, and I feel a little bit guilty about it. But, it is what it is. You can't like them all. Like I said, it's not a bad book, so I'm going to put it kind of probably in the middle-ish, middle lower. It'll probably end up being in the middle by the time things are done. And I'm trying to be thankful for this book because, oh my God, guys, the one next week, we need to talk. So anyway, that will wrap up this edition of Project Poirot. Definitely let me know if you've read this one and any thoughts you may have. And yeah, I will see you guys back here next week to talk about Taken at the Flood and how much I loved it. So, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, please like, subscribe, follow me on the social medias if you're so inclined. I have all that information listed in the description box below. And I think that that's going to do it. I hope you guys just have a fantastic day, and I will talk to you soon. Bye!